Hey guys, it's the Bearded Wonder. We're here for another installment of the Cold War. Today, we're going to be talking about the arms race. Not really quite that arms race, more a description of the technology advances that both countries kind of sought to add to their country in order to have more power with which to threaten the other one, like, hey, we're going to really jack you up if you try to mess with us. So, the first thing that we need to talk about, the most obvious one and the one that gets the most attention, is nuclear weapons. And that's always fun to talk about. So, the Americans, we talked about this. Truman actually delays Potsdam a couple of days, and that's because they are testing the world's first nuclear weapon. They do it out in the desert. In America, this is July 1945. It's called the Trinity Test. They win. After that, you have Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You can see the pictures there, as well as a picture of what it did to the city afterwards. These are the only two nuclear weapons that have ever been used in all of world history. America dropped both of them on Japan in August of 1945. There has never been a nuclear weapon that's been used against a country or people since that date. August 1949, the Soviets finally test their first nuclear missile or nuclear warhead. It's successful, and so by 1949-1950, it's a very real possibility that they would have nuclear weapons as well. Throughout the next really 10 years or so, both countries kind of experiment making larger and larger bombs and testing them. The picture that you see here on the left is a picture of Tsar Bomba. Tsar Bomba is the largest nuclear test in human history. You can see by the graph here that it kind of dwarfs everything else that's been done. You can see hopefully the picture there of the airplane and Mount Everest. That kind of gives you a sense of what this was like. It was breaking glass like 100 miles away from where they detonated it. The shock wave it was laying down trees flat in the middle of Siberia for hundreds of miles. We have the capacity now to just completely wipe out entire cities, not just Hiroshima and Nagasaki, relatively small compared to like a New York City today. We have the ability to flatten entire metropolitan areas. I mean, we're talking about drop it in the middle of Charlotte, and here in Fort Mill, we're like not even a thing. That's the kind of power that these weapons have today. So over those 10 or 15 years, the United States and the Soviet Union build tons of nuclear missiles. A lot of people get hung up on the fact that on this chart, Russia has more than the United States. That's the Soviet Union. They have since collapsed. The Soviet Union has, and so now they're Russia. But all the weapons kind of stayed in the same country. Doesn't really matter. If you think about 7,000 or 6,800, if you can't name 7,000 major cities in the United States, and I certainly couldn't get anywhere close, it doesn't really matter that they have 200 more. I probably couldn't even name 200 major cities in the United States. You're looking at total destruction on both sides. So we have these nuclear missiles. They're pointed at each other, and this is going to create a problem because if one side decides to use their missiles, the other side is going to use theirs, and then the other side is going to use the rest of theirs, and pretty soon we've got 14,000 city killers just flying through the air towards each other's countries. This is what we call mutually assured destruction. In other words, it's this philosophy that if one country were to use one weapon one time, the other country would use lots of weapons to respond, and then the first country would have to use more weapons to respond to the response. Kind of is, in a way, what has prevented nuclear war from actually happening. So, now that we have all of these weapons, what do we do with them? Well, the first step that the Americans and the Soviets take in the 60s is that they agree on something called non-proliferation. Non-proliferation basically goes where if somebody adds weapons, you don't do that. You're not supposed to, listen, you don't need any more. 7,000 is already more than you would ever need. Let's just both agree to not make any more. And so that's kind of what both countries have agreed to do. The other thing is something that we call disarmament, which is basically where the countries through treaty agree to take apart a certain number of their nuclear weapons, and the countries have done this several times. So you'll see charts with bigger numbers than the graph that I showed you before. Those numbers were in the 10,000s at one point. The main difference is that we've agreed since then to start taking these missiles apart. We don't need that many, and so we don't use them. Other technology was definitely a part of this as well. One of them, or a big one, is the submarine. Submarines are mainly used, honestly, as a nuclear missile platform. The reason being that a submarine can get a lot closer to another country than that country than you can normally. If we launch a missile from the United States or even try to fly an airplane, it's not going to get nearly as close. And we tend to think of nuclear missiles as these like things that are indestructible. The reality is that it's a very small warhead attached to some kind of device, whether it's a bomb or whether it's a missile, and you still have to get it to the city that you're trying to hit. And so the closer you can start, the better. And so submarines were a big part of that. Also involved in the arms race are various kinds of jet aircraft. The Germans actually, at the end of World War II, developed the first jet aircraft. They can go, 700-800 miles an hour at that time, which blows everything else out of the water. The fastest propeller aircraft are going 200-300 miles an hour. So obviously the jet gives you a huge advantage. You can see here some of the different aircraft. The SR-71, the black plane there that you see in the top right, is a high-level spy plane. Can fly basically in low outer space and is able to take photographs of what people are doing on the ground. Spy technology is another big part of this. And finally, rockets are going to be a big part of this. The Germans actually built the first rockets, the V1 and the V2, during World War II as well. And fortunately for the Americans, and also fortunately for the Soviets, they were able to take them from the Germans. Basically, this enables both sides to kind of have access to this technology. And they both kind of adapt it in their own way. And this is going to connect to another topic that we'll talk about on another day called the space race, which is sort of connected to the arms race in the sense that the space race is kind of about, it's not just getting to the moon or even proving that you have the technology to get to the moon. There's a very real idea that spy satellites and even this idea of kind of a Star Wars kind of a fighting strategy could be used in the future. And so there's a strategic element, a weapons element to the space race that's not often discussed, but is definitely also worth talking about, and so we're going to just mention it here. That's it for us today. I hope you enjoyed this video lesson, and hope you have a good day.